Hello, everyone. It looks like there might be a few more people trickling in, but since it is 2 o'clock, I say let's go ahead and get started. So my name is Adrianna Province. I am the Registrar at the Conservation Center for Art and Historic Artifacts. First off, can everyone hear me well? I guess a good way to test that is if in the chat, if you just want to type in where you're from, I would love to see that. And then that way we can also make sure the chat is working. So yeah, first question, where's everyone from? Oh, hello from Chicago. Salt Lake City. Oh, great, people can hear me. Wonderful. Buffalo, Little Rock, Pittsburgh. Oh, this is fantastic. Austin, hello. Princeton. All right, great. This is wonderful. Okay, so good, chat is working. Everyone can hear me. Yeah, so to start, like I said, I'm Adrianna Province, and I'm here to answer any packing and shipping questions you may have, especially about packing and shipping fine art, artifacts, and works on paper. So whenever you guys are ready, go ahead and start typing in some questions, and I am ready to answer. And also, as they always say, you know, there are no stupid questions. If at any point you want some more clarification on something I'm saying, or if we ever need to go back to another question or you want some clarification, please just let me know. And yeah, just type it into the chat. And I am here to help. So yeah, as we wait for some questions to come in, at the Conservation Center for Art and Historic Artifacts, we deal primarily with works on paper and books and photographs. So most of what I'll be discussing today will be objects of that nature and how to pack them and ship them. The center's been open for over 30 years, and even though I'm a registrar, we do not have a permanent collection. All of our objects come from private individuals and institutions and museums who send us their artifacts and objects to be conserved. And as they come in, I accession all the objects, and when they leave, it's up to me to pack them. And in the meantime, make sure everything is in its proper place and well organized and documented while it's there. All right, here we go. It looks like we're getting some questions. All right, so the first question is, do you have any advice on packing paper, oversized materials, and bound materials for temporary storage during remodels? Great question. So mostly for the works on paper, if they are unframed for a remodel, first thing I would do is just make sure you have a safe place to put them. During a lot of remodels, there can be dust just going everywhere, especially if people are taking down or putting up drywall or just general cleaning. There will be a ton of dust. So the first thing you want to do is just make sure that your objects are safe and will be safe from the environment as it's getting remodeled. So make sure you have a place to put everything, whether it's in a storage facility or in a vault, or if you're low on space, maybe even like clean out a closet, make sure that it's all safe in there. And also if you have some flat files, that would be great for works on paper in particular. Like I said, just make sure that they're in a different room from where the remodel is happening if possible. So for works on paper, if they are unframed, I would recommend first putting them in an archival folder. At the center, whenever I pack works on paper that are flat, I try to use an archival folder, or I often make one out of 10-point archival paper. And then, so that at least, you know, even though it might be a temporary storage solution, it's non-acidic. So you don't have to worry about, like, if it goes a bit longer with the remodel, you don't have to worry about the acidity affecting your object. So once it's in a paper folder, make sure that it has potentially like a backing board of like a blue buffered board, something sturdy so you'll be able to move it without risking bending of the paper. And if it's small enough in a folder and it's secure and in that archival 10-point paper, then you can put it in a flat file. If it's something a bit larger, or let's say it's parchment and might be a bit weighty, instead of putting it in a folder, I would definitely recommend putting it in an archival box. I know Hollinger Metal Edge and Gaylord Archival sell some beautiful archival boxes. So I would just put your object in one of those boxes during the remodel and safely store it in your second location away from the remodeling. Oversize materials. If these are still like works on paper or if they're framed, I know oversized materials tend to be maps, which we've had a lot of experience with. If you are able to put those on a roll safely, if they're stable enough to be rolled, then I would definitely recommend getting a large archival tube. Talus has some really, really fantastic ones right now. I think they're called their heritage boxes. And it's a buffered blue board tube that you can very safely roll your object on. And these heritage boxes, depending on the size that you need, the edge of the tube actually fit into their heritage box. And so the edges of the box don't actually touch the object, and your object is floating on that tube in there, and it is gorgeous. And I would highly recommend that if it's like an oversized map. If it's a large frame object, I would recommend maybe putting some cardboard corners on it just to keep it safe while you move it, and then definitely wrapping it up in some poly. Like I said before, you really want to make sure that no dust or fine air particulates can get into your objects during a remodel. And bound books, I would also recommend just getting some nice archival boxes to keep them in, keep them flat. And another layer of protection that would be great during a remodel would be to then get some poly bags and put your archival boxes in those poly bags, again, just as another step to make sure that no dust or particulates can affect your objects. So yeah, good luck on a remodel. All right, another question. Let's see. Ooh, this one's interesting. I'm not sure if I fully know the answer to it, but I think it's a really interesting question. What to do for packing when materials go through screening for federal materials, which can actually melt pages together. So I'm curious if this is kind of like a TSA protocol, where if things need to be x-rayed, or where these pages might melt together. I'm a little unsure on that. But depending on the size of your object, federal TSA, or radiation for security. Oh, thank you for clarifying. Yeah, so if you might be able to clarify a bit more, do you have the medium of the material? Perhaps because I used to work for a fine art storage packing company, and whenever there was TSA screening, some of these packing locations, or sorry, some of these fine art storage facilities actually have TSA screening cages. So instead of having your object go through and get irradiated at the TSA, or get handled by whoever's at the TSA airport, these people are not registered art handlers. Like it can be quite the headache. So what I would recommend is finding an art storage facility that has a TSA screening cage, and they can actually screen the objects for you without having it have to go through an x-ray machine. I've done a few TSA screenings and was training to be a certified art TSA screener for a while. It was surprisingly fun, mostly because you get to open up these gorgeous crates and see all the beautiful artworks inside, and you have to feel up everything in the crate. And but at least then you know that A, your piece won't get irradiated, and B, that only art handlers are handling your object instead of some random TSA screener at the airport. They do a great job, just possibly not the best for artwork. All right, let's see. Let's find another question. Ooh, can you describe basic good practices for packing? Great question. So mostly when packing, especially, well, any objects really, you want to make sure that it is going to be easy to unpack. The key that I tell everyone is to label and just presume that the person who is unpacking has no idea how to unpack it. So of course, anything that your object touches, you want to be archival material and or acid free. Um, Even though like you hope that if you're packing it, whether it's for like transport or just a quick pickup or however, you want to make sure that it's going to be as stable as possible. And if someone, forgets to unpack it for a bit, that it's going to be stable for as long as it can be in that packaging. So like I said, with the remodel objects earlier, if you have like an archival folder or made out of like 10 point or 20 point for works on paper, keep your object in that. And then if like once it's in that, it's going to be stable for quite a while. And then you can pack it a bit more thoroughly with some less expensive materials. So at the center, if I have a flat work on paper that needs to get picked up by a client, I'll put it in a folder, and then I will construct some photo corners using the same 10-point paper. And then I will adhere it to a piece of double-walled cardboard. The corners, I mean, not the object, never. Ooh. I'll adhere the corners to double-walled cardboard, and then I'll place the object in face side up. Always make sure that the face of the object is up. And something that we do different at the center that I notice some institutions sometimes do, at the center, we always attach our corners with double-sided tape on the back, and then the corners open up while facing up. This way, it makes it very easy to get to the object without having to pull corners apart. I know some places will have it so the opening of the corners is down against the cardboard or blue board, which is tape over the top. That works for some objects, but if the object is very, very fragile, you can risk damaging and overhandling the object when trying to take off those corners. So we always just adhere our corners directly to the cardboard or blue board, have the object in the folder on top with the corners facing up, and then we put another sheet of cardboard on top of the closed corners and the folder. This kind of sandwiches the piece in the middle. And then from the outside, we use like some more strips of 10-point. And then I'll use some, I think it's Scotch brand 375 packing tape over the tops of those. So Scotch brand 375 packing tape is great at sticking to itself with the back. And so what we do is we kind of pinch it closed using that tape. And I always, for best practices, use tape tabs. I know our conservators hate tape. Tape is a dirty word in this industry, but for preparators and packers, and we need to use tape to make sure everything is secure. But if you do use tape, please, 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 please fold the end over to make a beautiful tape tab so that the object, like whenever you do need to open the tape, it is very easy to remove. Some other good practices for packing: if you are packing framed work with glazing, always make sure to put a sheet of glassine over the glazing before you continue to pack it. This will protect the glazing while it's in transit, but more importantly, if you use bubble or anything else, you won't risk getting little bubble stipple dots on the glazing. I've seen that occur once or twice, and so just always try to mitigate that where you can. So at the Center for Works on Paper, if it's, at the Center for Framed Objects, if they're glazed, I put a sheet of glassine over the glazing, and then I wrap the entire frame and everything in bubble wrap. And with bubble wrap, I always do bubbles out. Again, to try to mitigate that potential for that bubble stippling that you can see if there's like a drastic change in environment or humidity, the bubbles turn into a mess sometimes. So bubbles out, and then I'll secure that with some low tack tape, the bubble wrap. Again, with tape tabs everywhere. And I also will often label the tape tabs, and I have a note on the bubble wrap saying that these are packing materials used for temporary use only. Our bubble wrap is not archival, so try to unpack it as quickly as you can once you get it. And then, so if it's in bubble, then I will also often, depending on the object, put a poly bag around it. I will also put, if it's something that like a client needs to pick up from the center, that's a framed work, after I get it in that bubble wrap, then I usually build a box to put it in. This way they have something relatively safe to carry around and that is sturdy to take it from the center to their homes or back to their institutions. And so we have a lot of great material, but normally since the object is already framed or enclosed in a sealed package, I'll just build a cardboard box to put around it. And the base of the box, I always leave one side open. I don't tape up all four corners on the base of my box in a way to try to mimic the archival boxes, like I said, that you can get from Gaylord or Hollinger, just as a way so you can more easily remove the object. So that was a bit long-winded, but if you want some more good practices for packing, I'm happy to go further in depth later. Another question. If you are a small institution without trained staff for packing, what materials can you use that are low cost? Ooh, good question. So low cost materials, I know that especially, they can be hard to find because a lot of archival materials can get very expensive very quickly. So what I would recommend is maybe go ahead and, if it's in budget, to try to invest in some large rolls of some things. So it may be just a one-time large purchase, but it should last you for a while. I would definitely see if you could get like a big roll of glassine. I know they sell those at Talus. I would also recommend a big roll of Volara. If this is something that like Volara is going to be great to just have on hand for any instances, but if you, let's say if you have a box that an object came in and or that you're planning to use to ship an object, Volara is going to be great extra padding, and it will also keep the object safe, and it is archival. So I would definitely splurge for a big roll of Volara. And also like cardboard. If you can invest in some like poly bags, which would be great, or just some sheets of poly, you can always wrap your object in that to keep it in its own little microclimate. Then bubble wrap and cardboard, and then some tape. Like as much as I would love to send every object out in an archival box, sometimes for packing, it's just not financially a good idea. But yeah, cardboard's been great. Find a good supplier. Make sure that you're happy with their cardboard. I know a lot of times paper suppliers will get in varying like degrees of cardboard. So find one that you like. I definitely recommend getting double walled if you can. And yeah, so I say some poly, some bubble, glassine, and some cardboard should be great. And like a lot of the packing tape I use, I get from Staples or Amazon, and just get some low tack tape, some packing tape, some strapping tape. Strapping tape is great for building boxes, and if you need to, let's say, ship a box via USPS or FedEx or something, strapping tape will really help to keep your box closed while it's in transit. Just anytime you use strapping tape, make sure you go over it with some clear packing tape just to reinforce it, because strapping tape sometimes does not like to stick to itself. So yeah, I hope that helps. Get like poly bags, bubble, and some good tapes should be good. And then when you can splurge for those extra things like Volara. because it will always come in handy. I love using Vollara. All right, next question. Let's see. Do you have any good tips to pack library material, circulating material, or rare books to minimize damage to them in the shipping process? For some reason, packing books is one of my favorite things to do. We at the center get in some gorgeous, gorgeous rare books, and they are always such a delight to pack and handle and see. A lot of times, depending on the value of the book or its stability, libraries will often already have a clamshell box for the book, or they'll purchase to have one made while the object is at the center. Clamshell boxes, however, for each individual book can get very pricey very quickly. So you could also even look at some other archival places like Tallis or Hollinger to see if you could get a book, clamshell box about a good size for an archival book, or an archival box for a rare book. And then just having the book kind of live in that box for as long as you can, because especially with books and paper, you want to mitigate as many environmental issues as you can and as much light as you can. So if you can get a clamshell box first, highly recommend it. Definitely go for that. If you can't get a clamshell box, but you still need to ship a book, the first thing I would do is wrap the book in glassine. Not only will the glassine protect it and be its archival barrier from your other packing materials, if it's a book that, say, you're sending to a conservator, it will help keep any like flaking elements or anything like that from just going into your entire box. So wrap it like a present in glassine. And whenever we use glassine, I use some micropore surgical tape on my glassine, and because it peels up very easily. So again, it goes back to the idea of whatever you pack, you want it to be easy to unpack later on. So for a book, I would wrap it in glassine, just like a present. And again, use those tape tabs on the micropore tape that you use to seal the glassine. Also, whenever you pack, like I said earlier, make sure that everything is up, is facing you, so that when you open it up, you don't have to move the book over, you don't have to flip anything too many times. So pack it with the seam facing up, so it'll be easier to unpack later. So once it's in that little glassine present, go ahead and wrap it in bubble wrap. Seal that bubble wrap very well with some low tack tape, which is also easy to peel off. Again, always use your tape tabs. And then I would build a box around it. And just a cardboard box would be fine. And then seal it up with some, especially for shipping, you want it to be a fairly tight fitting box. For shipping books and any objects really, you don't want it to have the opportunity to flop around in a box, because that's where more damage could occur. So make sure it fits well. If there's any extra space, go ahead and pad that out with some foam or some bubble wrap. And once your box is sealed, it should be good to go. All right, next question. Here we go. How do you protect materials in flat files since they are not airtight? Cover with plastic sheeting? Yes, that's a great idea. If it's in a flat file, and let's say you're still doing remodeling, or perhaps if you weren't able to remove your objects from the place that's getting remodeled, I would, if you can, wrap the entire flat file in poly sheeting, even a couple of layers of it, and then seal it up really, really tightly with some tape. Dust is a huge enemy. If you want your object to be safe in the flat file, regardless, I would definitely still try to put it in a folder if you can before placing it in the flat file. The folder will also act as a bit of a barrier between any other elements. And then also periodically just go ahead and clean your flat files. Like take your objects out, move them to a different space, and get the dust buster and clean in there and do some dusting. And that'll help keep your objects safe while in the flat files if they're not, you know, in a box or anything else. Normally, I haven't had too much trouble with dust and flat files like outside of remodeling. But it's another good practice to just keep everything clean, to try to mitigate any other dust bits or anything else that could potentially get into your flat files in the future. So I hope that answers that question. Let's see. Next question. Ooh, hold on, there's some really good ones here. Please bear with me. Let me see. Do you have a pattern for corner protectors? I assume using corrugate. I have used a pattern before that I found online, and I'm trying to remember the source. However, a lot of the corners that I get, I actually got from Uline. They sell just big packs of flat cardboard corners, and then you can assemble them. And what's nice is that the largest cardboard corners they have, it still has 3 adjustable sizes on it. So I just got one of those big packs of cardboard corners, and then whether I think it goes, you can assemble them to be anywhere from 1 inch deep to 3 inches deep, and those have been really, really useful. So and again, if there are some resources online on how to build your own cardboard corners, and I just found it much more easier, and it saves time to just have those big corners from Uline. So best of luck. I know that they are out there, but yeah, I just use the big corners for myself. All right, let's see. Where are poly bags available from? Actually, this goes into like partly from my last question. Most of the ones I use now are from Uline. Again, we splurged and got some big boxes of 3 different sizes of poly bags. I think the ones that we have at the center are 18 by 24. I think there's one that's 22 by 30. And then I think our largest one is 30 by 40. Since we deal with works on paper and mostly small objects, those size poly bags have been the best for us. If it's anything larger than that, then I just use a large sheet of poly that you can get from Uline or Talus to use that instead. But yeah, I mean, like I said, those 3 size bags have been great for us. And yeah, good luck. And whenever you seal your poly, you want some very good, strong tape. Just make sure, once again, that you use tape tabs so it's easy to remove the tape afterward. All right, got some more questions in. All right, here's a good one. We have documents going out on numerous traveling exhibits. Should they be unpacked between exhibits? I presume you mean if it's that the exhibit is going to an institution, being put on display, getting repacked, and then brought back to you for a bit before going out to the next exhibit. If you could give me some clarification on that, that would be great. If not, that's what I'm going to presume. Okay, that's correct. Thank you. In that instance, it really depends on the material, the actual pack material that is touching the object, and for how long that object will be off of display. So I would certainly try to have whatever material is touching the object directly to be archival, to give you a bit more time. If it's going to go over a year, then I would recommend unpacking it. Of course, you want to avoid overhandling your objects as much as possible. But let's say, for instance, your object is in an archival blue box that's then put in a cardboard box. The cardboard is acidic. And while it won't really hurt your object if it's already in an archival box within that cardboard box, maybe just take the archival box out of the cardboard while it's out of the exhibit. You could always store your cardboard boxes someplace else in the meantime. Hopefully you have space for that. I know that at the center we have a lot of space management issues when it comes to our original packing materials that come in. And storing cardboard boxes is very hard, but we always do our best to return everything in its original packing. But yeah, if it's in an archival box initially or in an archival folder, when it comes back to you, you have a little bit to, like I wouldn't fret too much if it's in an archival material with unpacking. I think it should be fine. If it goes over a year, definitely unpack it or just make sure it goes back into its original safe space. If the material that is not touching your object or that is touching your object is not archival, definitely unpack it. Just because I'm not sure how long it's going to be off display. But you definitely want to make sure that you reduce like any off-gassing that might be happening from any new materials that these objects get repacked in, or keep it safe from any acidity from cardboard or anything like that. So, but if it's in archival material, then I think you should be mostly fine. All right, let's see. Are there video links that show step-by-step instructions of the different scenarios I am describing? There are some, like, I'm just trying to figure out how to phrase. I'm not sure if there are, I haven't really seen a lot of video descriptions, but there are a lot of webinars and workshops through the Conservation Center that can help reinforce these things either in person or right now probably through our wonderful Zoom and digital ways that we are all utilizing right now. So if you keep an eye on the webinars through the Conservation Center, I know that they've often done like box making workshops, and I am hosting a packing workshop in November. So if you want to sign up for that, I'd be happy to actually show you what I'm describing as opposed to just rambling on like I am. But that way you can see like the materials that I use in person. And like I can show you how to make tape tabs and how to make a box and all those wonderful things. But just video links off the top of my head, I'm sorry, I don't know of any. Doesn't mean they're not out there, but I'm just not sure of them. Well, yes, I can reference my resources so you can see what they are. So first off, Volara is spelled V-O-L-A-R-A, and it is it's a type of foam that can be used to pad around objects. And Volara is archival, so it can be in direct contact with your objects. Volara, again, is V-O-L-A-R-A, and it can be purchased through Talas.com, and that's T-A-L-A-S. Talas is a wonderful resource for archival material. I believe they're based out of Brooklyn, and they have a ton of fantastic boxes and packing materials, and I am a huge fan of Talas. And once again, that's Talas.com. The other resources that I've mentioned, Hollinger Metal Edge, they have some great boxes and packing materials as well. And that is Hollinger. And we'll try to post in the chat like the actual references so you can see them later. So Hollinger Metal Edge, like I said, great for boxes. And then the other one is Gaylord Archival, and that's Gaylord. All these places, fantastic materials, and they have a wide price range as well. So maybe it's something where you only need to buy like one small box for your most expensive book. It should be relatively easy to find that on there and for a fairly inexpensive thing. Or I believe Talus also makes custom archival boxes that can get very, very large. So that might be another good option for you as well. And like 10-point and 20-point sheets of paper we get through Hollinger, I believe. And you can kind of pick the size of packs you want delivered to you. So if you don't want 100 sheets of 10-point, because also those packs can get very heavy, you should be able to order in smaller increments to save money as well. All right, let's see. Oh, another question, and this goes with it. If you don't have a budget for archival quality boxes for everything, but can get blue board or box board in bulk, there are instructions and diagrams online for creating your own boxes and 4-fold folders for smaller boxes. Oh, perfect. Yeah, wonderful. Definitely check online. I can try to describe to you my box making method. Again, this might be something easier if you see one of our box making workshops. I think some of those workshops are online, so definitely keep an eye out for those. Whenever I make a box, let's say I just had a book, I wrapped it in glassine like a beautiful little present, and then I wrapped it in bubble wrap, sealed the bubble wrap with my low-tack tape, and now I want to build a box for this. And let's just say it's a wonderfully square book that is, when I measure it out, it should be 10 inches by 10 inches by 3 inches, hypothetically. What I will do is I will measure the dimensions of the packed object in the bubble wrap. So word of warning, never ever try to build a box without, like, just based on the dimensions of the object, make sure it's the packed dimensions. If you're planning on wrapping it in bubble wrap, go ahead and do that and then measure. So what I do is I add a 1/2 inch on every side for the length and the width of the book to get my basic box dimensions. So using those basic box dimensions, hold on, I'm going to write this up. So hypothetically, let's say that when I add a 1/2 inch to each side, just for the ease of my math, let's say that I know that I want my box to be 10 inches long by 10 inches wide by 3 inches deep. Also, when you're making a box, please, please, please take into account the depth of your object. There is nothing worse than spending as much time as you can building a box and then realizing it is too shallow. So always get your length, your width, and your depth. So before I cut cardboard to build this box, I would try to figure out the dimensions for my lid. Oh, hold on, I'm gonna back up a second. So our complete packed dimensions of our object are 10 by 10 by 3. That 3-inch depth, in order to get the size of your of the base of your box, you're going to double the depth. So in this case, it's 3, doubled is 6, and you're going to add it to your length and width dimensions. So 10 plus 6 is 16. So now your base box is going to be 16 by 16. In order to get the lid size, you're going to have to account for the width of the cardboard that you're using. If you are making a box out of single wall cardboard, add on add on 1/2 inch to that 16 by 16 dimensions. So you will cut one sheet of cardboard to be 16 by 16 inches. That's going to be your base. And then your lid cardboard is going to be 16.5 by 16.5. If you are using double wall cardboard, add on 5/8 of an inch to account for the extra width of the cardboard. So if you're using double wall cardboard in this scenario, you would do 16 5/8 by 16 5/8 for your exterior dimensions or for your lid dimensions. And your base dimensions would still just be 16 by 16. So you have these 2 sheets of cardboard. One of them is slightly larger than the other after you cut them all out. And now you're going to have to make your edges. At the center, we have a wonderful machine, and I have no idea what it's called, unfortunately, but it creases the box for you. It's just like a little foot-pedaled lever that I stand on, and I put my cardboard underneath, and it smushes it up. But you could also, if you don't have one of those or even some method of scoring, you can use a box cutter. Just make sure that just the tip of the cutter is coming out of the handle of your box cutter, because you want to make a very, very shallow cut to score your box. So in order to get the right dimensions for the sides of your box, it's just going to be the depth from your initial measurements. So our initial measurements of the packed object were 10 by 10 by 3. So for both your base and your lid, you're just going to cut or score in 3 inches from the edge of your cardboard to get your sides. So go ahead and score those on all 4 sides, and then you can just fold up the edges. Make sure you cut out your corners, otherwise it won't fold right. And that way you can build a beautiful box. For the corners of all of my boxes, I secure them with strapping tape, and then I cover the strapping tape with that Scotch 375 packing tape just to make sure it's secure. Also for the base of your box, like I said, just secure 2 corners. Always leave kind of 1 corner flap so you can easily remove the object. And then for the top, go ahead and secure all 4 corners for the lid. But using those dimensions, like I said, adding it up like that, I have gotten a perfect box every single time. And it has a very snug lid, which is great if like, because you don't want a lid that's too big, because sometimes it can just come off without you wanting it to, or it makes it difficult to pick up. So I know that one was a bit rambly as well, but I love making boxes, if you can't tell. So if you have any more questions about making boxes, and like specifically, I will try to get a bit more clear. Sometimes it's just difficult to do without the visuals of this. Let's find another question. And please keep the questions coming. We're still going. We have about 15 minutes left or so. So if, let's see. Oh, when should I use hold on one second. How can I decide on a shipper? When should I use like regular shipper versus an art shipper? Oh, okay. So for that one, I would say it's heavily dependent upon a few factors, particularly like the value of your object, the stability of your object, and the size of your object. With all of these packing methods that I've already given you, if you feel confident in your packing and you feel pretty good about it and you like your materials and it's something small and that's very stable, I think securing it and then sending it via an overnight shipping service is perfectly fine. Ideally, I would always use overnight shipping, especially through FedEx, because I'm able to get a tracking number, and then I don't have to worry about the object like being out of a climatized area for too long. At the center, we always ship objects only Monday through Thursday, in order to avoid shipping on a Friday where the object could just be in a warehouse over the weekend until it gets to its destination. I know that's not always ideal, and sometimes overnight shipping can get a little expensive, but just for peace of mind and the safety of the work, 9 times out of 10, we use overnight shipping for that. If your object is very valuable, or if it has stability issues, or if it's really heavy or big, I would highly recommend contacting an art shipper. There have been times where I have felt comfortable with packing my object, but it could be too big for FedEx to carry it. Art shippers are great because you can always rely upon them to have climatized trucks with air ride, and people who know how to handle your art. So I've shipped the tiniest things with art shippers. I've shipped giant things with them, and there have even been some occasions where, even though I love packing and I feel really good about it, maybe the object is just too big or just too heavy. And in that case, then I would contact them on behalf of the client to get quotes to see how much it would cost them to pack it. But oftentimes they use the same materials that I do. It's just they have a few more hands to help pack while they're there. So yeah, and again, it boils down to like the value of the piece, the stability of it, and the size. So I hope that helps. Let's see. Hold on 1 second, please. Okay. Let's see. I'm taking down artwork of all sizes and ages for a new exhibit, and taking that opportunity to do an assessment of each artwork. One of which is made out of tile and bowing. Either way, hold on. You want to pack, as any assessment will be done over time, and if needed, move to conservation for work. Need a low cost. Okay, so if you are assessing objects and taking them down as you go along, as like I love that you mentioned that it's going to be done over time. As you're assessing each object, I would just try to use basic handling practices, like good handling practices during this time. So this kind of goes back to making sure you have a space to put your objects. If you're doing an assessment and you have some large frameworks or 3D objects, anything like that, like I would get like a big packing blanket, even the kind that they like, you can get those. The ones I'm thinking of are like the ones I've used whenever you moved, in like furniture moving blankets and pads. Just because they're all huge and blue, and those are great for 3D objects. They're very stable, and you can just put that over a table. If not, then I would just try to get a sheet of blue board or some archival board, or maybe some chloroplast, or even just make sure your table is clean. Make sure you have a landing pad for your object. That will help a ton when you're doing your assessment. Also, if you're moving things around, I would invest in getting some foam blocks. So if you're taking, let's say, large framed works off the wall, you have a place to set them without risking damaging the frame. So set them on those foam blocks instead, or on some pieces of Volara to keep your frame, avoid it getting in direct contact with the floor. As you do your assessments, just do wonderful condition reports for everything, document everything. Thankfully, we all have cameras on our phones now for the most part. So take photos, and that will help your conservator too. If you need to take something to conservation, you can send them a photo of it in advance. But if you need to pack an object to send to a conservator, I would still use these methods that you can, like I said, invest in some glassine. I saw another question on here that says if I preferred acid-free tissue to glassine. They're very similar. I just found glassine to be a bit easier to handle. Acid-free tissue is good to kind of like pad out a box. If you have an interior box that's small, but it needs to go into a bigger box just for something, I would not use it for shipping padding. I would just use it to, like, if you need to carry something to your car, the box to your car, and then from the car to the conservator, that's decent enough packing using archival tissue, crumpled up archival tissue, acid-free tissue in the box to act as padding. I would not use that if you're shipping something. But I just find glassine to be a bit more easier to use. It reminds me a lot of wrapping paper. It creases really well like wrapping paper. And so whenever I pack, if I try to imagine like I'm packing a really nice present, that always kind of helps me handle it a bit better. But yeah, if you need to take an object to a conservator from your institution, even though it can get kind of pricey, I would still invest in a roll of glassine and then just some bubble wrap and cardboard. That way, at least, you can get it to your conservator safely. And depending on the conservator, they might repack it in those same materials to get it back to you. So sometimes it is worth investing, especially if it's a very valuable object, going ahead and getting an archival box for it. But if you can't, just try to get whatever's in touch with it, with your object directly in an archival material before you pack it. It's hard to get a bit cheaper than just bubble wrap and cardboard. So I would still go for that. And, you know, everyone loves bubble wrap. It's fun to pop. So I think that would be your best bet. If it's something that's unframed, like a flat work, whether it's a watercolor or a photograph, try to put it in a folder. And then, like I mentioned earlier, use those photo corners and just try to seal it, like kind of pinch pack it in between two sheets of cardboard. You don't want the cardboard to ever come in direct contact with your object because it is so acidic. And also make sure your photo corners are well attached to the cardboard so that there's no way for your object to fall out of its folder. I've seen some places only use 2 photo corners on folders. I always do 4. And I always make sure that my photo corners are big enough. If you have a tiny letter, a tiny old document that's a tiny letter, and you put it in a big folder, you need to have, because maybe it's the only folder you have around, make sure that your corners are big enough so that that tiny letter cannot fall out of that folder. That just, you know, you don't want to give it any way it can come out of there without using tape or anything else. So yeah, just make sure you pinch pack it securely. That should be good enough to get it to a conservator if you are just hand delivering it. If you need to ship it as a pinch pack, go ahead and pinch pack it as normal and make sure it's levelly sandwiched and your corners are large enough. And then you can wrap that in bubble wrap, seal that bubble wrap with low tack tape, and then put a box around it. Again, make sure it is well fitted and fairly tight so nothing can bounce around while it's in transit. And then, yeah, I say it should be good to send it there. Once again, though, always make sure that your object will be easy to unpack. Have everything facing up when you can. The person who's unpacking your object should not need to flip it over or put it on its side or anything else during the entire time. It should just open like a book when they're unpacking, but make sure it's still secured. That's why it's very important to have those good, like, low tack tapes for the bubble. Like, you don't want a super tacky tape to use on bubble because when you open it, it's just going to shred the bubble wrap. Kind of like you don't want to use a very tacky tape for glassine. Glassine can tear very, very easily. Like I said, it's similar to wrapping paper. If you use a low tack or a high tack tape with glassine, it will just rip the glassine to shreds. So that's why I highly recommend the micro pour. And that micro pour can be purchased on Amazon. It's pretty inexpensive too, and they come in large packs of, I think, like 12 to 16. And they also come in a great variety of widths. So if you're packing a lot of tiny objects, maybe you only need a 1/2 inch micro pour. If you're packing some bigger ones, you can go for a 1 inch. And same with strapping tape too. If you're building a box, go ahead and get some varying sizes of strapping tape, anywhere between a 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch, 1 inch. I've even seen like 1.5 inch strapping tapes if you're making some really big boxes. Yeah, I would go for that. So I think for that instance, just make sure if you are doing assessments on all your objects that they have a good place to sit while you're assessing them. Make sure your hands are clean. Make sure your hands are clean now regardless of objects, but always make sure your hands are clean. If you're handling works on paper, at the center, we do not wear gloves when we're handling works on paper. Gloves can actually tear paper. So we always have just incredibly clean hands and use that with our paper materials. If you are handling 3D objects or framed objects, please wear nitrile gloves. And yeah, make sure your object has a safe place to go as you're determining whether it needs to go to a conservator or not. All right, it looks like we have about 4 minutes left. If there are any final questions, please try to send them in now. Like I said, I will try to put up a list of all of the suppliers that we use to get our materials from. But even cheaper materials, like, do not be afraid to use Amazon. I know shipping's a bit, there's some delays in shipping right now through Amazon and everywhere else, given the current state. But yeah, I've used Amazon and Staples for so many materials. For micropore tape, strapping tape, packing tape. Yeah, oh, it's just been wonderful. Ooh, do I have a go-to website for box templates? Not off the top of my head. I know that I've gotten a few from, well, I've gotten a few descriptions of box templates from the museum registrar manual, but that's a very expensive book. So let me try to find some other good places for box templates that could work. I know that there are some places that describe, especially if you're packing framed objects, how to construct a cardboard collar, which is where you just have some strips of cardboard that go around the edges of your piece, and then you pack the whole thing with poly to keep it taut so the poly doesn't actually touch the face of the object. That's really good for frame pieces or framed objects without glazing. So I know I've seen some places that show how to do cardboard collars. Boxes are a bit more difficult, but I'll do some research and I can get back to you guys on that. Sorry, I wish I had a better answer for that one, but I've just been, I learned a ton of just making boxes and our packing methods from the center. And I have a wonderful giant registrar binder with all of my tips and tricks and secrets in it. But I'm going to have to go back and just kind of double check my resources just to be sure that that like I can still share them outside of like the giant registrar Bible. Because while that is great, it's a bit silly to spend so much money on a big old book to just get some packing tips. Any resources for best cavity box making? Ooh, that's a good one. So cavity packing, if you are unclear with that term, it means essentially cutting out a cavity specifically for your object within your box. So you would have a box, you would fill it with foam, and you would measure the object and cut the foam to then mimic like a beautiful little custom spot for that object. Yes, I definitely have seen cavity packing described online. I think it was through the Smithsonian, actually. I think that was the most recent website I found for it. I do know that they have a wonderful crate making and crate description kind of manual through their website. I think if you just Google like crate specs Smithsonian, they show you all of their crating specs for every kind of object. And they have one for like a brace packed crate, a cavity box, bins, painting crates, everything. And it was incredibly impressive and I highly recommend it. It's very, very fun. But for making a cavity box, I will have to double check. But like I said, I can try to share that with you once I confirm that. All right. Oh, and it is now 3 o'clock. I know that's a lot of rambling I did about cardboard and bubble wrap and tape. But like I said, I really enjoy packing objects, and I think it's a fascinating part of the field. And so I hope I was able to help you guys today with some of your questions and boost your confidence for packing your own objects in the future. So thank you again for coming. Like I said, I will try to confirm some of my resources for box making templates. And we will also post resources for our vendors that we get our archival material from. So thank you all again. You have been wonderful. And I hope to see you all again soon. Thanks.